Let me ask you something. What if I told you that right now, sitting in museums, locked in university vaults, buried under centuries of dust, there are objects that should not exist? Not in a supernatural way, not in an alien way, in a very simple, very uncomfortable way. These are real objects. Physically real, scientifically tested, historically documented, and every single one of them was built using technology that, according to everything we know about history, humanity should not have had yet. We are talking about a computer built 2,000 years before computers existed, a battery that was generating electricity before anyone supposedly knew what electricity was, a metal that contained carbon nanotubes, a material we did not discover until 1991, forged sometime around the year 300. Today, we are going inside 5 of the most baffling ancient technologies ever discovered. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to look at human history very differently. Because the story we were told about how civilization developed, it has some very significant gaps in it. Let's open the vault. Before we get into each technology, let me establish something important. Every single thing in this video has a completely human explanation. These were not gifts from extraterrestrial civilizations, they were not magic, they were built by human beings. And that is actually the more unsettling part, because it means that at multiple points in human history, in ancient Greece, in Mesopotamia, in medieval Syria, in India, there were people who figured out things that we then completely lost, forgot, never passed on. Think about what that means for a second. We assume human progress is a straight line, always forward, always building on what came before, but history tells a different story. History tells us that entire fields of knowledge have appeared, flourished, and then disappeared completely, sometimes taking centuries to rediscover. Technology 1. The Antikythera mechanism. The world's first computer built in 100 BC. The year is 1900. A group of Greek sponge divers are caught in a storm and forced to anchor near a small island called Antikythera. While waiting out the storm, one of the divers goes underwater and finds something impossible. A shipwreck, ancient, probably Roman era, and inside it a corroded, barnacle-covered lump of bronze about the size of a shoebox. Nobody knew what it was. It sat in a museum for years, forgotten, until researchers started cleaning it. Inside that corroded lump of bronze were more than 30 interlocking gears, dials, pointers, inscriptions in ancient Greek, a mechanism of staggering complexity, the kind of complexity that historians thought did not exist until the 14th century clockmakers of medieval Europe. This was built around 100 BC. Let that number sit for a moment. What could it do? This ancient computer could calculate the positions of the sun and moon. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance. It could track the movements of all 5 planets known to the ancient world. It could calculate the timing of the Olympic Games. It used differential gearing, a mechanical concept that engineers thought was invented in the 1500s. A 2021 attempt to fully replicate it described it as, and I am paraphrasing here, a creation of genius that combined Babylonian astronomy, mathematics from Plato's Academy, and ancient Greek astronomical theory into a single mechanical device. 400 years. Think about what that means. Someone built this. Someone understood gears, astronomy, mathematics, and mechanical engineering at a level that would not be seen again for over a millennium. And then nothing. No descendants of this technology, no workshops producing them, no mentions in historical records of how it was made. It appeared. It vanished. And we found one surviving example at the bottom of the ocean. The question that nobody can answer is not how it was built. Scientists have mostly figured that out through CD scanning. The question is, why was this the only one? And what else did whoever built this know? Technology 2. The Baghdad battery, a 2,000-year-old electrical device. The year is 1936. Archaeologists excavating near Baghdad, Iraq, unearthed something strange during a routine dig. A clay jar, about 5 inches tall. Inside it a copper cylinder. And inside that an iron rod, isolated from the copper by an asphalt plug. On its own, this sounds like nothing. An old pot with some metal bits inside. Except when Wilhelm Koenig, the director of the Iraq Antiquities Department at the time, examined it, he noticed something that stopped him cold. The construction was almost identical to a modern galvanic cell, the clay jar as container, the copper cylinder as cathode, the iron rod as anode. Fill it with any acidic liquid vinegar, lemon juice, wine, and it generates an electrical current. Experiments with replicas produced around 1 volt of electricity. Enough, some researchers argue, to electroplate thin layers of gold onto silver objects. Now here is where the scientific community splits into 2 camps. Camp 1 says yes, this is a primitive battery. Ancient Mesopotamians somehow understood the principle of electricity 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in 1800. Camp 2 says, we have no electroplated objects from this era and region to prove it was used for plating. It might have stored sacred scrolls. It might have had a completely different purpose. Here's what makes this genuinely unsettling regardless of which camp is right. If it was a battery, then humanity had electrical technology in 250 BC and then completely lost it for 2,000 years. The knowledge just vanished. And if it wasn't a battery, then ancient engineers in Mesopotamia accidentally built a perfect working electrical device without knowing what electricity was. Neither explanation is comfortable. And here is the thing that most people do not know: the Baghdad battery was not unique. Similar devices have been found across the same region. Multiple clay jars, multiple copper cylinders, multiple iron rods. This was not an accident. Someone was making these deliberately. For what purpose, we genuinely do not know. Technology 3. Damascus steel, the blade formula that died with its makers. Imagine you are a European crusader in the 12th century. You have crossed half the known world to fight in the Holy Land. Your sword is good. It is the best steel your continent can produce. And then you face a Muslim warrior carrying a Damascus blade. His sword cuts through yours, not chipped it, not bent it, cut through it. Damascus steel was legendary throughout the medieval world. Swords made from it were multiple times stronger and sharper than anything Western smiths could produce. They held their edge through hundreds of battles. They had a distinctive flowing, watered pattern on the surface, almost beautiful, like frozen water. And they were produced in the Middle East from roughly 300 CE to the early 700s. And then the knowledge of how to make them simply stopped. The last Damascus steel blades were produced sometime around 1750. The craftsman who knew the process died. No documentation survived. And despite centuries of metallurgists trying to reverse engineer them, nobody fully cracked it, until 2006. German researchers examining a genuine Damascus blade under an electron microscope found something that made them stop breathing: carbon nanotubes inside the steel, woven into the structure at the microscopic level. Carbon nanotubes are one of the strongest materials known to science. They were first described in scientific literature in 1991. They require advanced understanding of material science and chemistry to produce intentionally, and they were inside a sword made in approximately the year 900. The working theory is that the specific combination of iron ore, carbon material, and the unique forging process, hammering at precise temperatures with specific cooling rates, accidentally created conditions that produce carbon nanotubes in the steel structure. The smiths did not know why their steel was extraordinary. They just knew that if they followed the exact process, the exact ore, the exact temperature, the exact number of folds, the result was a blade unlike anything else in the world. When the trade routes that supplied the specific Indian iron ore called woods were disrupted in the 700s, the smiths could not replicate the results with different ore, and without understanding the science behind it, they had no way to adapt. The knowledge died because it was never understood, only practiced. That is one of the most haunting things about Damascus steel. The people who made it were not scientists, they were craftsmen following a recipe, and when the recipe was lost, so was the result. Technology 4, the iron pillar of Delhi, 1600 years old, still not rusting. There is a pillar standing in Delhi, India, that has been outside exposed to monsoon rains, humidity, temperature swings, and open air for over 1600 years. It is made of iron. It is not rusting. The iron pillar of Cute was erected sometime around 42 CE. It stands over 7 meters tall and weighs more than 6 tons, and despite a millennium and a half of exposure to the elements, it remains almost entirely free of corrosion. This should be impossible. Iron rusts. That is what iron does. It is one of the most basic facts of materials science. Expose iron to moisture and oxygen and it oxidizes. It corrodes, it degrades, unless it was made in a very specific, very extraordinary way. Modern metallurgists who have analyzed the pillar found that it was forged from phosphorus-rich iron with very low levels of slag. The high phosphorus content, about 0.35% compared to the near zero levels in modern iron, creates a thin protective layer of iron hydrogen phosphate on the surface when it first oxidizes. This layer, called a passive film, actually stops further oxidation completely. The pillar essentially protected itself. Here is the extraordinary part. The method used to intentionally create phosphorus-rich iron with this specific composition was not formally understood by modern science until the 20th century. The process of passivation, creating protective oxide layers on metal, is a field of active research even today, with applications in aerospace engineering, construction, and medical implants. Ancient Indian smiths in the 5th century were doing it through a forge welding process, hammering small pieces of iron together at high temperatures without any concept of phosphorus, passivation, or material science. They just knew it worked. And then, like Damascus steel, the exact process was never formally documented, never studied, never understood by those who practiced it. The pillar survived. The knowledge of how to make another one did not. Technology 5, Greek fire, the weapon that won empires and was never rediscovered, 6072 CC. The Arab naval fleet is advancing on Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire, vastly outnumbered, deploys a weapon that has never been seen before. Ships equipped with bronze tubes begin spraying liquid fire onto the water. The fire floats. It burns on the surface of the sea. Water does not put it out. In fact, water makes it burn more intensely. Greek fire, also called liquid fire by Byzantine sources, was the most feared military technology of the medieval world. It won battles. It saved Constantinople multiple times from sieges that should have destroyed it. It gave the Byzantine Empire a military advantage that lasted for centuries, and the formula was kept so secret, protected so obsessively, that when the Byzantine Empire finally fell in 45 it died with it. Nobody knows what Greek fire was made of. Modern chemists and historians have proposed dozens of theories. Crude petroleum with quicklime, naphtha mixed with calcium phosphide, pine resin with sulfur and bitumen, some combination of all of these. None of the proposed formulas fully explain every documented property of Greek fire. Every single attempt to recreate a substance with all of these properties has failed. The closest modern equivalent, napalm, developed in 1942, shares some properties. But even napalm does not burn intensified by water the way historical accounts describe Greek fire. Here is what makes Greek fire unique among the technologies in this video. Every other technology we covered was lost accidentally. Damascus steel was lost because the ore supply was disrupted. The Antikythera mechanism died with the civilization. Baghdad battery knowledge faded. The iron pillar process was never documented. Greek fire was lost deliberately. The Byzantine Empire protected the formula with the same intensity it protected its gold. Access was restricted to a tiny number of people. The knowledge was never written down in complete form. It was passed person to person, a chain of whispered secrets, and when that chain broke, the secret died. They chose to keep it so secret that even they eventually lost it. That is not just a technological mystery, that is a lesson about the fragility of knowledge itself. The revelation, so here, is the thing I want to leave you with. 5 technologies, 5 different civilizations, 5 different eras of history, and the same story every single time. The Antikythera mechanism built in Greece around 100 BC, nothing like it for 400 years. The Baghdad battery built in Mesopotamia around 250 BC, electrical devices rediscovered in the 1800s 2,000 years later. Damascus steel perfected in the Middle East around 300 C carbon nanotube technology, rediscovered in 1991, 700 years later. The iron pillar forged in India in 42 CK. Passivation chemistry formally understood in the 20th century 500 years later. Greek fire deployed by Byzantium in 602 C, still not recreated, still not explained. This is the thing that history classes never tell you. Progress is not guaranteed, knowledge is not permanent. Entire fields of human understanding have appeared and disappeared, sometimes multiple times across the span of recorded history. And here is a question that should genuinely unsettle you. What do we know right now today that future civilizations might lose? What knowledge exists in 2025 that could vanish in the next catastrophe, the next collapse, the next disruption of the supply chains and institutions that keep our knowledge alive? The people who built the Antikythera mechanism did not think they were building a mystery for future archaeologists. They thought they were building the future.